My name is Moj. I'm the CEO of BeautyCon Media. I'm a third-time serial entrepreneur. Thank you. I first got involved in this company as an investor. I've been in the digital media space for a really long time, and BeautyCon is have you guys heard of it? Anyone heard of it? Heard of it? Okay. Yes, you've heard of it. If you are, call it like 12 to probably 32 and in the beauty space and you watch a lot of YouTube and Instagram, you probably definitely know exactly who we are. So we're gonna play you a few seconds of a video and tell you about how content creators are disrupting the beauty industry. Magic. Emily.
Oh, here we go.
Where's the sound? Yes, there you go. Okay.
Road runner, road runner. Feeling my power. Road runner, going under my power. Get your radio on. With your radio on. Road runner. It's lit. I'm big timer. It's a loud banger. 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 I'm big timer. It's a loud banger.
Cool. Okay, so it's my goal to make you all experts in Gen Z in the next 9 minutes. You know what Gen Z is. You know they're essentially, oldest Gen Z is essentially 16 years old right now. You know millennials are essentially what we're talking about 1980 to 2000, so you're 17 to 37. And then Gen X, which nobody cares about, is... Nobody cares. Nobody cares about... You know, we're not that cool. I don't know why. We're small. Okay, so in 2015, Gen Z represented 19% of the US population, and by 2020 will represent over 25% of the US population. Gen Z is the first generation to grow up alongside mobile devices, platforms, social media. This is not innovation to them. This is just the norm, right? They're growing up front and center. YouTube is giving them sort of a global view to what life is. So for them, it's very immediate and it's fast. You've heard the word authentic. That's really a way in which they live by. So they're thinking about how to express their political views, their social views, their sexual views. Like their entire brand is being self-expressed. There's a massive adoption of smartphones, technology, all of this. You know, you think you're a massive user of technology. They are like massive user times 10. They're sleeping with their phones, like literally sleeping with their phones. Gen Z has fueled the collapse of an industry I'm in called beauty. Beauty is a massive industry. Anyone here in the beauty industry? Anyone? Yeah? Okay. If you didn't know, it's like L'Oreal, $100 billion company. Huge, 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 right? So they're fueling the collapse of the beauty industry. There's examples of this, like L'Oreal Cosmetics buying it for $1.2 billion. And these are, like every day you read the trades and there's $1 billion, $500 million, $2 billion, $3 billion acquisitions because indie brands are now the new cool kids and prestige brands have no choice but to buy them. So some of these new brands are things like Anastasia, Kat Von D, Kylie Cosmetics, which I'm sure you all have heard of or have not bought. These are all companies that within a year or two of being are already at the $200, $300, $400 million a year in revenue, right? Really, 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 really bonkers because they're not doing it through traditional retail. They're not doing it through traditional marketing. It's an e-com store, most likely Shopify. They're going through email lists. They're going through their Instagram and YouTube channels and growing really big businesses. So not valuations, but actually cash in the door. Some example of that is Kim Kardashian Beauty launching her new line. It's like a contouring kit, $48. She sold over 300,000 units in less than 5 minutes. amassing $14.4 million. So we're talking about a real industry. It's pretty awesome. According to many CEOs within the sort of traditional beauty space, it's the collapse of the beauty industry that is beginning. It's like the demise of what's happening right now. So it's similar to music industry, public industry. Now it's the beauty industry that's going through a major unearthing. So while they crave authenticity through social platforms, we sometimes think their content's sort of fake or not real. But for them, it really is, and that's how they've come to meet their friends and look for products and how they sort of enjoy their community. And while we don't really appreciate the way in which they consume content, that is essentially how they live the majority of their lives. Do you guys have anyone in your life that's like this? You do, right? Like you're like, get off your phone. And they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. Right? Like this is never going to happen. So it's just not. Okay, so open platforms and technology have allowed marginalized and niche communities to become mass. So if I was in a brand presentation, I would say niche is the new mass. And what that means is the democracy of digital platforms have allowed for ethnicities, sexualities, different colors, different sizes of people to essentially become social stars, and where traditionally, like a normal agent in CAA or William Morris would never really think about representing someone that was different, right? They were generally looking for a normal person that could be cast a lot, but digital stars don't really have to fit that mold. So that's, I think, one of the most exciting things. And it's definitely changed everyone's sort of way into approaching marketing. So this generation takes more pictures in a day than the average parent takes in a year. One of the stats that I thought was really interesting is that 65% of teens rely on social media to discover and select beauty products, which means brands no longer need huge marketing teams or celebrities or ginormous billboards and magazine ads. So I think it's a really exciting time. The movement of Gen Z is sort of changing the barrier of entry for almost every brand. It's really allowing a whole new realm of entrepreneurs to run these companies. A lot of these companies that are being born today are being run by women or minorities, which is very different than before. And so to go a little deeper into the how, I'll explain how Facebook has 1.9 million users, WhatsApp 1.2, Instagram 700 million, and Facebook Messenger 1.2. So essentially 20% of all time spent on the internet by Gen Z is with one of those brands. So Facebook is still a huge, huge, huge piece of this conversation. On those combined platforms, there's 60 million businesses, and every day there are 526 million posts that relate to the beauty industry. Every day. 526 million. That's a lot. So people like to talk about beauty. So that means there's no way TV can really compete with that. There's no way that a traditional media company can compete with that. There's a brand called ColourPop that has been launched about 2 years ago that gave you Kylie Cosmetics, and they've gone from palette of 41 to 400 in under 2 years, which would normally never, ever, ever be possible. So the gap is widening. As sort of marketers start to try and figure out how to get to Gen Z, because Gen Z is super influential also to household decision making, to their parents. Their parents desperately want to be cool to their Gen Z kid. They want to do things with them. They want their parents to like they want their approval of their child. So like there's a massive influential person within the house. And sort of thinking about how digital and brick and mortar are starting to work together is like a conundrum that everyone is now starting to think through. So to help think through that, Facebook announced that they're going to link online and offline technology and data together for advertisers and brands. So that they're essentially saying that I can see whether or not you're an online or offline shopper, so that I can give you personalized ads to either speak to your online shopping habit or your offline shopping habit, which I think is really cool, that the fact that they've figured out how to do that. So I think brands are now being challenged yet again. Not to be outdone, Google, like Facebook, who also understands Gen Z, is starting to do the same thing with everything they're doing on YouTube. So YouTube has more complete picture of Gen Z because of Gmail, YouTube, Maps, Android phones, and being that they always sleep with their phones, Google's sort of sitting on top of all of that data as well. Google has announced that they're going to bridge an online and offline data service to their advertisers, claiming, we don't know if this is true, claiming that they will track 70% of all credit and debit transactions to consumers that see things online to buying things at brick and mortar. So we'll see if that's like an interesting thing that they can figure out. So Facebook and Google's growth represents how companies have to innovate and keep up with the target behavior and voracious appetite for technology. And according to Pixability, nothing moves Gen Z's consumption for beauty more than video content. So not blogs, not really even Instagram, but true video. The volume of video on YouTube has gone up over 200% and does every year. 47% of that content is consumed by women between the ages of 13 and 24. It's just like staggering how much content they're consuming. So that is essentially where you live if you are with a brand, because this audience, if you're 12 to 17, the market for that audience is currently $2.3 billion. So somehow a 16-year-old is getting an allowance from somewhere to buy all of this stuff, right? And I know that because we do tons of business with hundreds of thousands of young people, so they're being funded somehow, which is, like I said, their parents. Their parents are dying for that approval. So it's pretty awesome. So in closing, this is just the beginning. You're going to see this happen to publishing, to media, to music, to every other industry as Gen Z starts to enter sort of the consumer market, starts to be more influential, starts to be more dominant in conversation. It's changing. I mean, I think if you think millennials change the way in which we operate, I think it's not going to be a little bit different. It is going to be a complete shift. Gen Z just is approaching things from a completely different way. The good news is they're more woke than any other generation was, so they're conscious. And they are driven by authenticity, so I think it's really exciting. So you can close. Thanks. Last video? You're good. Yeah.